Welcome, students. We have a new section of notes called Greece, Birth of the West. Be sure to write down the title of these notes, Greece, Birth of the West. This is going to focus on just 5.2 city-states, Athens and Sparta. Now, we answered a question for warm-up. How would you describe American culture? And the reason for that is because Western culture is what founds American culture. So to understand Western culture, it's easier to understand American culture because many of our founding documents in American history, are from Western civilization, which is the birthplace, is the Greeks. Now, when we look at Western civilization, we have a contrast, Western civilization and Eastern civilization. In answering that warm-up, things like independence, freedom, entrepreneurship, capitalism, competition, those were probably all things that one of those things might have come to your mind when you think of American civilization or American culture. And that's because that is Western culture, which was inspired by the Greeks, especially Athens. Eastern culture would be more of harmony, balance, respect, family. And so you have a contrast there and potential conflict. When the Europeans came over to the New World, they were in conflict with Eastern culture because they had Western culture. Western culture being from Europe. Eastern culture is more from Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East, and also Native Americans who came over the Bering Strait from Asia. And so if you are somebody who has a Western culture, you might be offended by Eastern culture because there's different norms. Civilization is a shared heritage, traditions, and values. So when we say civilization, Western civilization or Eastern civilization, we're talking about shared values, shared traditions, shared heritage. Now, neither of these are better than the other. Western is not better than Eastern, and Eastern is not better than Western. They're just two ways of looking at culture. They are two heritages or traditions that have developed in different parts of the world. And much of history has developed those perspectives. For Native Americans that believe in the harmony with nature, that is a very beautiful thing. Respecting animals and respecting their life, even when you are using them for food and for resources. That focus on family is very important to Eastern cultures, for example, in Asia. But that is not any worse or better than Western culture that focuses on independence and freedom. So it's important to have a balance between the two. And I think that when you study Christ in the New Testament, you notice that he transcends culture. There is no better or worse, but that Christ transcends. And so he is almost the embodiment of both cultures, but transcends them. So where does this culture come from? It comes from Greece. And as you see there, Greece is also mentioned in the book of Acts, and that's kind of neat. Much of Paul's missionary journey was through different Greek places. We have the book of Galatians, which is a place in what was known as Asia, which is today Turkey. You also have the city of Philippi, where we have the book of Philippians, Thessalonica, such as the book of Thessalonians, Corinthians, the city of Corinth, which is near Sparta. So pretty neat to notice that Greek civilizations and Greek cities are also found in Scripture. By 750 BC, the Greek city-state became the formal government. And so in order for this place, for the birthplace of democracy, the city-state became the formal form of government. Now keep in mind, you do not need to write down what is italicized. This is just review, but you should write down what is underlined in your notes. Some of the homework questions that you had, the vocabulary was polis, political unit. Acropolis, which is the root word is polis, which is a fortified hilltop. And so those were some of the vocab terms that you had that I wanted to put in the context of Greek civilization and the Greek city-state. So within each of these city-states, you had their own political unit, and that is where they had their forms of democracy, especially within Athens. But in places like Sparta, you had a monarchy, a rule by a king. And so that was characteristic of some of the Greek city-states. Aristocracy, a rule by nobility. And oligarchy, a rule by a small group of powerful merchants. And so Greece, being the place that wanted to do things different, the birthplace of Western civilization, where you have more of a sense of representative government or democracy, people making laws, not so much of the king making the laws. You have these ideas of aristocracy. Should it only be the nobles that are making the laws, or should it only be oligarchy? Now, keep in mind that this is just review right here, so these are italicized, so you don't need to write these down because these are from the homework, so don't feel like you have to write this down. You also have Greek city-states had things such as tyrants. Now, a tyrant back then was a positive thing. A tyrant today is a negative thing. Tyrants, they would seize control and rule in the interests of the ordinary people. And so these were people that were the voice of the common man. And Donald Trump is a controversial figure today that his supporters see him as a representative of the common man, of the common people, and that's what he believes himself as. Now, his critics would say that his tyrant is a negative thing, and so they would say that no, he's just a noble or a wealthy citizen winning the support of the common people. And so you even see that back then during the Greek times that you had tyrants that would arise and would have the interest of the people, but the question is, what people were they representing? Why do you think democracy is popular today? Why was Greece so interested in politics? Well, I think that answer is because of Western civilization. People like freedom, people like autonomy. So democracy is appealing because of that sense of freedom. But is democracy the best form of government, or is there a dark side to democracy? We shall see. So as you see right here, when we talk about Greece, this is the geography of Greece right here in the Mediterranean. You have Macedonia in the north, and you have Sparta in the south, and you have Thessaly and Athens in between. Now, there were two main alliances, Team Athens and Team Sparta. You had other Greek city-states all throughout here, but those were the main two alliances, and they were oftentimes at war with one another, Team Sparta and Team Athens. However, there was a point in time when they were united together. Think of it as maybe Team Iron Man and Team Captain America, that they would have their moment of disagreement, but also have their moments of unity. Athens and Sparta. Now, Athens, education was key to democracy. Their education provided logic and public speaking to prepare them to debate issues in the assembly. Schooling, everything that we do and study today, was only for sons of wealthy families, however. So this schooling was not totally democratic. However, the schooling was to prepare for democracy. They believed that they needed rulers, common rulers, so to speak, that were educated, that could debate, that could speak. And so democracy was born out of that need for education to prepare in that way. Now, as you can see, the problem with this is that the wealthy families who could provide the schooling would be the ones that could only be prepared in logic and public speaking, and so therefore, usually it was the wealthy that became the main rulers of what would happen within the democracy, the voting that they would have. Yes, they would have equality in voting, one vote, one person. However, the debates would sway people, and that was oftentimes only the wealthy that could sway the people. And some would say that is still an issue today in America, that though we have equality with voting, you do have people who use their money to sway votes, and in that. Sparta, on the other hand, was not as democratic. They believed in the values of duty, strength, and discipline over ideas of individuality, beauty, and freedom. So Team Athens is what inspires Western civilization in America today, especially with the individuality, the beauty, the freedom that America prizes today does come from Athens. Sparta is more of the duty, the strength, the discipline. So Sparta is still a little bit tied to Eastern culture, Eastern civilization, whereas in Athens is really the place that will birth Western civilization. As you can see with the icon of the owl there for wisdom, you have the Spartan helmet right here representing duty, strength, and discipline. You don't need to write down the italicized schooling only for wealthy sons. However, you should write down the other things that are not italicized. That's an example right there of the phalanx of the Greek soldiers, especially with the Spartans that would provide that unit. The Persian Wars. This is what's going to unite the Greeks in opposition to Persia. Persia is going to be the first big world empire, bigger than the Babylonians, bigger than the Egyptians. They are going to stretch to Libya and Egypt, the Holy Land right here, the Mediterranean, all the way to India, and then all the way to Greece. And really, Greece is the only one that's able to repel them. Now, Persia, as we see in this next section, was really not the bad guy, though Western civilization sees them as the bad guy. The Persians were the Eastern culture. And today in American society, we see the Greeks in much of our pop culture as the good guys and the Persians as the bad guys. Now, that's because of our view of Western civilization. But in reality, the Persians, even though they were an Eastern civilization, they tolerated Western civilization. They tolerated the Greeks. And so, in reality, the Persians are good guys. However, the Greeks did not want to pay taxes or homage to the Persians and their Eastern civilization. All right, so Persia hoped to unite Earth and empire. However, Athens and Sparta united and repelled the Persians. They resisted. They kept the Persians out of Greece. And so this is the only time that Athens and Sparta really united together. Other times they were at odds with one another. And because Athens and Sparta united together, they were able to, on land and sea, keep Persia out and able to, in a sense, defeat the Persians. And send the Persians home. This would make Athens the leader. They emerge as the leader of what's called the Delian League. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to delve into the Delian League, but this would make Athens the leader of this new Greece, of all these different city-states. New self-confidence would emerge in Greece. You don't need to write down that league members essentially became provinces of the Athenian Empire, but really you have Athens as kind of the focus. It's kind of like during the American Revolution, Virginia was one of the major states, and so that is a very clear example. Stage is set for a dazzling burst of creativity in Athens. And so you'll have the School of Athens. You'll have the philosophers that we'll learn about in the next section of notes that will start to really develop this Western civilization. And so Western civilization would not exist if the Persians were not defeated and if Athens had not become the leader. If Sparta was the leader, then we would not have Western civilization. The Persians, however, would strike back with Sparta's help, and they would actually burn Athens to the ground, and Western civilization would almost be lost. However, you will have the Romans and also Alexander the Great of Greece and other times such as the Renaissance that will rediscover the Greek and the Athenian Western civilization. And actually, the Muslims during the Golden Age in Baghdad with the House of Wisdom would preserve much of this Western civilization. So it's interesting that Eastern civilization protects Western civilization, but that's for a different class time. So that's this end of the notes there. Birth of the West, that was day 1. Day 2 will be another section of notes.